In this video, we're going to be doing some basic searching with PHP, and we're going to be searching in a MySQL database. So effectively what we're building here is a mini search engine for your website. And this isn't going to handle a lot of records. I've got about 500 test examples in here. You can see that we have a database here called website and just one table called articles. And we've got a title and a body here. You can see there's quite a bit of content in the body, but obviously there's likely to be more here. And this could be any data at all. Don't worry if you're not searching for articles. This could be products, it could be users, it could be absolutely anything. So let's go ahead and take a look at how this works. I'm going to type in lorem in here just to see what we get, and I'm going to hit search, and you can see that in almost all of them records that has been found. Now we're only showing the titles here, and I've just created them as example links. They don't really go to anywhere here. But at the moment we're searching the title and the body as well, and you can switch this up depending on which fields in your database you do need to search. So we're going to be creating this from scratch. You can also see it's telling me how many records are being returned, which is really good, and they're all listed out here ready for the user to go ahead and look and click on. So let's build this up from scratch and see what we can do. Okay, so you can see here that we've got a basic document just laid out here, nothing complicated at all, and we're going to be writing the code for the form inside of the body here. So in our browser at the moment, we've effectively got nothing. There's nothing to submit through to. Now the other file that I have, which is important, is the search.php file. This is the file that we're going to be submitting the keywords through to perform a search. And bear in mind that this searching is going to be very basic. It's only going to be based on whether a specific keyword that's typed in is contained within either the title or body. It's not clever at all. There are other solutions for this. So for example, we could use a full text search, but this has been proven to be slightly unreliable. And to be honest, in my opinion, if you're going to go with the full text search option, we're not going to be covering that in this video, you may as well use a search engine indexer like Lucene, Sphinx, or something like Elasticsearch. We'll go ahead anyway and we'll build this form out, and we'll submit this through, and we'll look at the basic searching functionality that we can perform here. So the action for this form is going to be search.php. That's where this form is going to be submitted through to. And the method here is going to be get. It can, of course, be post. This just basically means how the data is sent along with the HTTP request. It can either be sent along with the HTTP request in the content of it, or if you use get, that will be sent along in the URL, and then we can pick it up from the URL. Either one is fine, to be honest, but get just provides you with that flexibility where you have that search term in the URL. So what we're now going to do is I'm going to create a label here, and in here I'm just, well, we don't really need to create a label, but it'd be nice to say something like search and then have our input type in here, or our input element. So this is going to be a type of text. You can of course use a type of search if you want, but I'm going to just use text for now just for styling purposes. And we need to give this a name. Now this is important because this is how we actually pick up the keywords when we post them through to search.php. Now I'm also going to put autocomplete to off just so we don't get suggestions pop up and annoy us. So down here, just before the form closes, let's create a input type of submit, and let's give this a value. In this case it will be search. So when we refresh, we've now got a search keyword there which we can click on. We've got a search box, and we've got a search, an input submit, which we can click. That goes through to search.php. You can see here that we've got the keywords in the query string, but we've got no data. If I were to type in something in there and hit search, you can see that then's passed through. So on this page now, what our job is to do is pick this up and then go ahead and look inside of our database for any of these, so the title or body, that match this. So let's do this now. Inside search, let's open some PHP tags. Now I already have a folder inside of this directory called db, and I have a file called connect. So I'm using MySQL to connect. I'm connecting to localhost, which is my local server, root for the password, and the database name is website. and I'm storing this inside of a variable called database or DB. You might already be connecting to a database, so in this case you can ignore this and just use however you're working at the moment, but this is just a little example if you're not already set up. So what we're now going to do is the first thing we want to do is actually require this in. So let's do a require. So db connect.php. So this is going to allow us to actually query. The first thing that I want to do is actually check if that keywords is set. Now this here is called a get superglobal, and that contains everything that's within the query string. So in this case we can just use the keywords key to access that. And then what I want to do is I'm going to store that in a variable just here, like so. So now if we stick an echo on the front of this and we go ahead and refresh, you can see that that's just echoing out what we have. So we now have that value stored in keywords ready to put into our query and actually pull data back. The only problem is that at the moment we're not sanitizing this before, or escaping this rather, before we inject it into our query. So let's do that now before we forget, because that's really, really important. So I'm going to use the DB that we have inside of our connect to actually use the escape string method, and I'm going to enclose that like so. So now what we can do is actually perform the query. So let's create a new variable to store this so we can iterate through the results later. So we're going to say db query, and in here will be the SQL string. So let's just create some double quotes and pull this down just so we can do this line by line. It tends to look a little bit more readable. So let's say select, and we want to choose which fields we want to select. So if you haven't already set up your database table, go ahead and set this up. Let's take a look at the structure actually just before we go any further. We've got an ID here, which isn't necessarily that important, but it does serve as a primary key on this, and it also serves as an index here as well. You can see we've got the column name as ID. So that will speed things up a little bit. So we've got a title, which is a text type, a body, which is a text type, and a publish, which is a date time. Publish is optional. If you're just following along this video from scratch, don't worry about publish. You don't really need to populate this. So we've got a title, body, we've got loads of content filled in here. Oh, and by the way, this was actually generated by a library, a PHP library called Faker. So if you do want to generate some dummy data, go ahead and download Faker and put this in a loop and query that within a loop. Just, it's bad practice, but it will just get the data in there for you. And there's plenty of information on here anyway to how to install it and use it. So we want to select the title and the body, the title and publish. We're not going to use published, but this is just an example to show you that you can select it. We want to choose where we want to select this from. In this case, it's articles. And we're going to say where body, like, and then we're going to choose what we want the part of the body to be like. Now, in this case, for example, if I wanted to hard code this in, I'm going to do 2 percentage signs. Anything inside of this now will be matched with anything being on the left and anything being on the right. So if I was to type A, I could probably assume that almost every one of these records here has an A in. You can see there's one there. So this means that search for an A where anything is on this side of it and anything is on this side of it. So if we wanted to change that to say, well, we want an A to be at the end, all we have to do is do this. Or if we just want to match A on its own, we could do that. We wouldn't ordinarily do that because we could say where body equals A. But like allows us to provide these wildcards. So let's put them wildcards in there. And now let's actually inject the keywords in. There we are. Now we're also going to say or title, like, and then we're going to give the same thing. So we can say this, keywords, like so. So that's our query complete. What we're going to do now is we're going to output the results, and then we're going to check if there are any results. And then, we're going to check if there are any results and then loop through the records. So I'm going to do this within this PHP file. Probably not a great idea to just stick this in the middle of this file. It's a little bit messy, but we can do this anyway. So I'm going to create a div. And this isn't styled, but it's just giving you an example of where you might put things. So result count. So in here we can say found x results. So in here now, I'm going to replace this x with an opening and closing PHP tag, and I'm going to echo out query, and then we're going to access the num rows property. That stores how many rows have been returned by this query. So before we go any further, let's take a look at this, and there we go. So we get found 498 results. And let's just test this out by taking perhaps just this text here and doing a search for this. So we can go back to our search page. There we go, found one result. Well, we got one result, but with a little bit of trickery, you can change this plural. So we now know that that works, and we could do the same with the body, but we pretty much know it's searching the body. So now what we want to do is create an if statement down here to actually check the results again. So this isn't really harming because we've already have this property available to us. So we're going to say query num rows. So this basically means if there are results, let's create a while loop. And the reason we do this is because we need to iterate through the fetch object method on the query that we've just performed, and that will then give us access to the results. So what we can say is we can say while r is query fetch object, and you can use fetch rows, which will return the results as an array, but I'm just working with an object because I'm already working with MySQLi in an object-oriented fashion. So we're now looping through. We can escape and reopen our PHP tags there, and then let's say div class, and maybe we'll say result here. Again, this isn't styled, it's just as an example. And let's create an anchor here just to simulate a link. And inside of here will be the title. So let's open and close a PHP tag, and let's echo out our title. And of course, because we selected published, you could also select the publish date if you wanted to, and you could format that however you wanted. So now what's going to happen is when we search for something, we now get all of the results listed out for us. Perfect. So that's pretty much everything done. It's a very, very basic way of searching, but I just want to warn you that this will get very, very slow if you do have lots of records or records with a lot of data in. So you shouldn't rely on this as a full-scale search solution for a website, particularly if you're going to have a lot of content. If you don't have a lot of content, so 500, 1,000 records, it shouldn't be too bad, but it just depends. So you need to make sure you monitor how well this is performing. There are other solutions, like I've said, like Sphinx, Lucene, Elasticsearch, and these will handle searching much better. They'll index your results from your database, and then they have an API which you can use to actually search against. But if it's a very, very basic search solution, this will do the trick.